Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Waterford United. I'm here today with Pete Davis, candidate for Waterford First Selectman, and Glenn Patterson, candidate for Waterford Board of Selectmen. We've had a nice summer and fall of some shows where we've shared different ideas and different issues. I personally am kind of sorry that this is our last show before the election, because I enjoy being with Pete and Glenn, and I enjoy us being with you. It's very close now to election time now. Election comes up on Tuesday, November 3rd. And I know it's going to sound like a high school lecture, but it's not only a responsibility for you to get to the polls and vote, but it's in your interest, in your family's interest. What happens in local government, what happens in government changes your everyday life in many, many, many ways. From the roads, to the way the schools are run, to everything that has to do with public safety, all the issues that affect your life and can, at some of the worst times in your life, be crucial to you, are there because government works or doesn't work the way it should. So I really urge you to take seriously your responsibility and your obligation to yourself to get to the polls and vote on November 3rd. That is, I guess, my segue for why it's so important that we do have local elections with issues. And on that, I'm so pleased to watch the fact that Pete and Glenn decided to run. You know, Pete Davis's family has been part of Waterford government and Waterford public life for generations, and so has Glenn. So Glenn Patterson and Pete Davis represent, you know, foundations of what's made Waterford a great community for many, many, many years now, and should be a great community for many years going forward if we all take our responsibility seriously. You know, I've watched for over a year now while Pete and Glenn have studied the issues, and they've studied hard. It's not a simple matter. All the issues are complex. They all have various routes, I guess, to getting to the best destination for the town, and they all have challenges about how you get there. So they've not only studied issues, but they've brought up important themes in the election campaign. Their website is full of information, and they've gone door to door, many doorways already. Many of you will know that, and they've brought these important issues to your doorstep. We're bringing it to your television set. It's on the website, and it's in all the publications that we've tried to put forward in these many months of the effort to elect Pete Davis as first selectman and Glenn Patterson to the Board of Selectmen. They've brought up many important themes and issues, and we won't have time to recap all those or review all those or even list all those in this brief broadcast. We can't review them all, but we want to kind of bring to your attention that has happened, and it's there for you to learn and study and help you decide. So when you get to the polls November 3rd, you'll make an informed vote and not just show up and cast a ballot. So with that kind of lecture of introduction, let me start, Pete, with you. And how do you think we can best improve our town government by making it more accessible and more responsive to public concerns and public issues?
Yeah, Paul, first of all, I want to thank you for that introduction, and probably the most important point in that introduction is the issue of getting out to vote on November 3rd. Yes. The last election, there was no competition at the top of the ticket, yes. So numbers were low. We're hoping that people take their obligation a little more seriously this time, and with competition at the top of the ticket, they do the research they need to do on both sides of the aisle and get to the polls and vote. It's very, very, very important to be involved at that level.
Contested elections are really good for the public life of a community, and that's why I'm so grateful to you guys for running this time. You've made our community public process much more vibrant and much more, I think, studied than it's been in a long time.
Yeah, it's definitely necessary.
Yes.
So, Paul, some of the reoccurring themes that Glenn and I are hearing going door to door, and we just have time to touch on a couple of them. But for Glenn and I think the issue at the top of the list is the issue of the public not feeling that they've been engaged or they've been, their opinions have been considered in a number of town issues that have been occurring over a number of years. Issues such as the animal control facility, Seaside, the staffing issue at Quaker Hill and Goshen.
Yes.
Issues surrounding the disposition of the Cohansey School, or the former Cohansey School property. And there's a fairly significant list.
Yes, there is. By the way, you guys are hearing it door to door. I've heard this for many months from the public that I know too. So it is in the public voice, that concern you just illustrated.
Yeah. So Glenn and I have had discussions over the past months about how we might better improve that process, because it's one thing to take note and point out maybe where some of the shortfalls are, but I think it's incumbent upon leadership or people that are considering a leadership position to express their views on how they might improve the situation. So some of the things we've talked about, and I think right at the top of the list for us, is we need to change the time of the Board of Selectmen meetings from 5 o'clock in the afternoon and go back to 7 o'clock in the evening, which is when you and I were an officer, or your administration, Paul. Those meetings were held at 7 o'clock in the evening. I don't know too many people that if they're interested in something that's on a Board of Selectmen agenda, it's very difficult these days to keep up with schedules at home, especially if you have a family. 5 o'clock in the afternoon is not an opportune time to hold any town meeting, in my opinion.
Certainly for most people who work certainly a day shift in their careers.
Right.
Yes.
So that's one thing that Glenn and I, if we're lucky enough to be elected, that's one of the first things we're going to do, is those meetings will shift to 7 o'clock in the evening. The other thing we would like to do with the Selectmen's agenda, in Glenn's words, quite honestly, is invite more public participation or communication at those meetings. I know in other municipalities that they actually set aside a period of time during their meetings for public comment.
It's on the agenda.
Yes,
It's
it's an
on the
agenda
agenda.
item, correct.
Yeah.
Agenda item, and it's done, and that level of communication is got to be better, in my opinion.
I'm on an appointed state board about water resources, and that's exactly what we do on that public agenda. We have a public comment section.
One of the other things we've talked about is just last Saturday morning, Glenn and I had the privilege of going down to Goshen Firehouse and participating in a town hall style meeting, which was pretty well attended, and the questions and the commentary was pretty good. There was a broad range of issues and concerns that were discussed. I thought it was a very productive meeting. We've actually talked about potentially scheduling 2 town hall style meetings during the year to invite the public in to discuss town issues. The other item we've talked about is continuing this type of a show. I think this has been a vehicle,
Yes.
obviously, for us to get our word out and discuss issues and offer potential solutions. But I think it's probably in the best interest of the community to use this as part of an overall community communication plan going forward. Public education is a very valuable thing. I think if the public understands why you're making decisions, and those decisions are based in some logical process, I think even if it's something that people don't agree with, they can understand what your thought process was and why, in fact, it's been decided.
And of course, we continue to refine, the modern approaches, the website,
Sure.
Facebook page, encourage maybe the town departments to get out there online, or things of that nature to help improve communication as well.
Yeah, I like all those ideas, and I agree that that's so crucial. For several years before my father died, he wanted to keep up on town issues. He wasn't able to get to meetings like he had in the past and always wanted to, but he enjoyed vehicles like this that allowed him to stay involved and keep informed, and I think that's great. I was laid up a good part of this summer. I know how important this is, so I'm grateful for that, and it was really great at Goshen to host you two at a town hall style meeting at Goshen Firehouse. That's great.
We've got the bones of a work plan, so to speak, and we'll be putting the finishing touches on that over the next few weeks, and we'll make that available on our website before the election, so people can actually go to the website and take a look at what we would propose to do. Part of the reason we're doing that, quite honestly, is leaders should be held accountable for their actions. It's difficult to hold leadership responsible for their actions if you don't know what in fact they are trying to do.
Right.
So we'll be creating this work plan, we'll be putting it out there for people to review, and if we are lucky enough to be elected, that will be our work plan for the first year going forward, and we would fully expect that at the end of that first year we'd review that work plan, and we want people to hold us accountable for accomplishing it. And
what worked, what didn't work, that type of feedback is important.
That sounds great to me. And as you know, the way Waterford town government is set up is after the election, it's a fairly short transition time to when the new officers take office. So should you be elected, and I certainly hope you will be, but there's not a lot of time between the election and the beginning of the responsibility. So
sure, there's a budget cycle already in process.
Correct.
Right? Yeah.
So I'm so grateful to hear that you two have taken that seriously, and you'll be ready to, as they say, hit the ground running when the bell sounds. And I think that's great. And it's not, unlike the national elections, it's not months of time. It's only a couple of weeks.
A few weeks.
Right.
Yep.
Right.
So, some people may perceive that as jumping to a conclusion, maybe, but the fact of the matter is,
you have to be ready.
Glenn and I have spent our lives as planners.
Yes.
That's what planners do. We want to be prepared, like you've said, Paul, to hit the ground running, because there is some period of time, obviously, involved when there's a change in administration potentially that you have to shift gears, and you need some time to get organized and actually lay out what it is you want to accomplish. So we felt that doing this, it would at least solidify to some extent what we'd be doing initially, and it would take some of that guesswork, I think, out of government.
I think that's great. It's a wonderful thing in America. Really, it's how well it works is I think fairly unique, or if not fairly unique, is unique, because it works so well. Once you take that oath of office, and something goes wrong right after it, the responsible party is the one that got elected. Yeah. And so it's not, if it's within the first minute. I remember when I first was elected and took the oath, there was a fairly large fire that night. And so, it was only within hours. There was no time to celebrate. It was on to the business of the town.
Literally in the hot seat.
Yeah, literally, yeah. So you two, I know, because I know both of you will be ready, and the voters can be assured of that, because as you said, Pete, both of you have spent your professional careers as planners and are well aware that you have to look at the contingencies and look at the options you have and try to make the best decisions with that information. Yeah. So that's good.
I'm going to let Glenn touch on one of the other consistent issues we're hearing going door to door, and that's the issue of capital planning and programming.
Okay, that will be great. And Glenn, as you do that, we've talked in this show about so many of these, and so many of these have been brought up to you too. I know when you've been campaigning door to door. I've been told many of these by constituents who are concerned about the town's direction. And I know we don't have time for all of them, but maybe you can talk a little bit about the process and maybe a couple of examples.
Sure, Paul. First of all, I'd like to thank you for hosting this. This has been a great experience for me. I hope it's been a great experience for the viewers. Hope they've enjoyed hearing from us. It's been a great opportunity to let people know what we think about things.
Before we went on the air, we were talking, the three of us were talking, Waterford is a town whose public, I think, takes the town's issues seriously. All of them, whether it's from how the youth leagues are run, to how the schools are conducted, to how the town is kept up. So I think hopefully it's been a good experience for them because you two have been serious in bringing up the right issues.
Sure. Yeah, I want to go back. You used a word earlier in your discussion with Pete that we have, what these capital issues are essentially, you use the word challenges. And these are the challenges now that are before us. These are things that have been going on for a while that need to be addressed. These are going to be our challenges. And since the challenges are known, you can go plan how you want to attack that. And as Pete talked about, we'll start off in a matter of weeks. You'll see our kind of overarching work plan for how we plan to proceed. I think if we're elected. Once you do that, though, you can't. You have these challenges. You know what they are. You can't plan enough. And I think the biggest specific one, as far as capital goes, and the one we've heard most consistently door to door, is the condition of the roads. We talked about that on several occasions, I think, on this show.
Yes.
And I think what may be most discouraging about that is that we had a consultant in place. There were the bones of a plan, an approach to take to go off and attack this.
Yes.
Of course, there were still decisions to be made by the town, by the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, about how much money we want to use to attack this. But
And at what rate you want to deal with the issue.
But the bones of the plan are there, and I can't emphasize to the viewers enough that this is going to be our approach on all of these issues where these types of decisions need to be made, is that we'll try to plan it out as best we can, and then we'll bring that plan to the Board of Finance and to the RTM, and they will have the final say. But it's incumbent on the Board of Selectmen, the First Selectman and the Board of Selectmen, to bring these plans forward. The other side of that is that once the plan, whatever plan is decided on by the collective Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, RTM, it's the Board of Selectmen's job then to honcho those jobs to make sure that work gets executed.
Yes, it is.
The work that it gets done.
The executive function,
and
that's
the
right.
best laid plans can easily go awry. Things don't always happen exactly like you plan them, but it's important to stay on top of that. So when you hit that bump in the road, you can react quickly and effectively and smartly to take whatever direction the problem you've encountered is going to lead you to go.
As old Ed Evento used to say to me, that way you can figure out how to get the ox out of the ditch.
Yeah, there you go.
It sounds like
Cactus Jack.
But I follow you, Glenn, and it's important to realize that, I guess, the combination of the two issues you two have talked about, the combination of the public concerns being heard, you can't satisfy everybody because not everybody's wishes are the same. You have to choose the best choices that are available with the best information that you can gather. But you can't gather that information without the public input. And the public's key to this. And then secondly, capital planning is I guess this has distressed me the most as a former First Selectman in what I've watched in recent years, because this is something that this is a responsibility that the First Selectman has to make sure it gets shepherded correctly. The day-to-day operation, there's great people working for the town. There's so many good administrators, good people in the line who do know what they're doing, and they do it well. But if you don't give them the proper tools, they can't accomplish the tasks that the town wants done. So that planning process is what that's all about, and that's what we elect officials to do. That's what they're there for. It's not to do the day-to-day. We have plenty of people we're paying to do that, and they're doing it well. I've witnessed that. There's very, very good qualified staff there. But they need the tools, and that comes from the elected leaders.
We were talking about this a little bit down at the Goshen meeting last Saturday morning. I think the thing that's been the most frustrating for Glenn and I, and personally I'm a little bit bewildered by it, to be honest with you. If you talk to in the business world, you use downtimes hard times, to do your planning, so as you come out of that, as things turn and start to move upward,
You can launch a rocket ship
Right.
if you want to. I'm
you're
with
pre-
you.
You're
Yeah.
prepared to take advantage of that turn in the economy, if you will, the turn in circumstances. Based on the record, again, the last time we can find that any real capital planning or programming or serious discussion about capital issues in the town occurred back in May of 2011. The budget season has started, the process has started. I quite honestly had expected, because the current administration knew that Glenn and I were out there, we were making an issue, or not making an issue, or discussing the issue of capital.
Of this
issues,
very
especially
concerned.
This
Yep.
exact topic.
Yep.
My expectation, quite honestly, was that I would have seen, before the budget process was officially started, some sort of effort to do planning. We were sitting in a Board of Finance meeting again, and even the chairman of the Board of Finance brought it up that, well, we don't do much planning, we don't do any prioritizing.
Right.
So having said that, again, I think it's our obligation to offer some sort of a solution. So the mechanism to approach this challenge is already in place, and it's been in place for years.
Yes.
It just hasn't been properly exercised, if you will. There's a long-range capital planning and long-range financial planning subcommittee in
Yes.
town,
Yes.
consisting of a number of different people from a number of different agencies and commissions, including the Board of Finance. In fact, it's driven by the first selectman, but it's chaired by the chairman of the Board of Finance. I don't even know that they've held a meeting over the past year. So we need to get back to using that process to do this properly. Now, plans are living documents. They need to be living documents. So to Glenn's point,
Yeah.
if you have a plan in place and there are unexpected obligations, such as an emergency collapse of a culvert or something,
Right.
an emergency collapse of a road such as Mullen Hill recently, you need to be able to adjust that plan and redistribute dollars to take care of those issues without getting too deep into the weeds. That's part of capital planning. You need to plan for contingencies.
Capital replanning.
Right.
My brother's a mayor of a town in the southern tip of North Carolina, near Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. They've just recently had serious flooding conditions.
I guess,
They had a road collapse in his town, and that will be a change in their capital direction.
Right.
And they had some sewer pump stations that failed because they were overwhelmed by the flood of water. Both of those would be very, very high-cost capital things that have to be done. And there will be a change in their plans because of it. But they have the plans to do that, as
Right.
Glenn alluded to, because they had thought about contingencies like a serious flood.
Sure.
The town had had a serious flood about 30 years ago, and they were still cognizant that you can't ignore the fact that those kind of things happen. So that's what you mean, and that's what happens with good capital planning.
Bottom line is, Paul, is you can't even begin to address emergencies or things that pop up unexpectedly if you don't have that basic plan in place.
Absolutely not. Yep.
Because it's important in this respect. The community deserves to know what those plans are, and they deserve to know what the priorities are. Now, those priorities can be established through a conversation of that capital planning group. The community needs to be involved in that. So maybe there are community representatives, instead of it being closed to government agencies and commissions and staff. Maybe the idea would be to have a community representative involved, and again, municipalities do these types of things.
Personally, when I was first selectman, that's what we did do. We did have some public and private sector interaction there, and that was a good combination because there were a slightly different perspective. Not often they coincide, but you do hear that range of voices.
I just had another comment on that something else, another item that actually came up when we were talking down at the firehouse is that when you have a plan in place, and it kind of goes back to the point Peter made at the beginning of the program, when you have plans in place, it makes it easier to communicate with the folks in town because you have a basis for discussion already. There's not this period of time where they're trying to figure out where you're going.
Right.
It's out there.
Yeah, they feel like they're chasing the wagon. the other
Yeah,
way.
exactly.
But they should,
and
they
I
should
think
be.
that's important. That's another important aspect of having those plans in
I
place.
think that is
And I guess,
consistent.
again, the
Good
frustration is that I don't understand why we don't have these conversations.
Yeah.
You need to start this with a conversation. The community needs to be involved. And that's the proper way to start this whole thing.
And all these things take years, and there's no reason to fear that conversation, because even though some of the capital items can look like they're going to cost a lot of money, if you plan it right, you can do that without a bump in the taxes and without anybody fearing that they'll be eaten out of house and home by what the government needs to accomplish. And that's what I know you two have spent your careers planning, and that's why I'm so convinced that both of you are prepared to do that kind of communication and planning that's going to make this, more accessible to the voters so they understand what they're getting. And if they object, they're going to have an ear that will listen to the objection and maybe make changes if the objection's valid and sound and significant to the final course that the government might be on. So I wish we could talk about all the issues that we've talked about over the summer and fall, but I think this is the essence of it, right? What you two have said today. And I think it's the essence of why it matters that Waterford United, I think, stands for what you two represent in good government, which is openness to the people and hearing what the people's voices say. I know in Waterford that many, many, many people think about these things very seriously, and they have in-depth thoughts about it. It's not just a simple response. So with that, we're about running out of time, and I'm almost reluctant to ask another question. So I won't really, but I'll just take the moment to say, as a citizen, I'm grateful to both of you. Thank you for taking up the challenge of running and to taking up Waterford's needs so seriously. It's a burden to your families as well as yourselves, and so I guess I thank them too. Maybe I have to thank them more because it's a lot, and I'm grateful, really grateful to you as a citizen and a voter in Waterford. So I'll conclude by saying, if we're successful in our effort, and Pete is elected and Glenn is elected, we apparently will be back here.
We will.
And I'm looking forward to that. And all of you have a lot of thinking to do, but most importantly, you have a big, big responsibility to yourselves and your families, that you have to get to the polls on November the 3rd and cast your ballot for Waterford's future, which has a lot of challenges, but a lot of great opportunities ahead. And as Pete and Glenn have said, correctly planned, Waterford will have a very, very positive future. It's had a great history, and it has a long, great way to go. So with that, Pete Davis, thank you for running for First Selectman. And Glenn Patterson, thank you for running for the Board of Selectmen. Waterford's very fortunate in both of you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.